What we're going to do today is spend the next hour yakking at you, and hopefully that will leave about 30 minutes or so at the end for you to ask any questions. What we find, as Angie had said, is that people ask questions throughout. So I think Liz is monitoring our chat because between the presentation and the slide notes, we're not actually able to see without switching back and forth and being highly annoying to you. So Liz is going to interject if there's some questions as we go along. So feel free to fire your questions through the chat. Um, so as Angie gave us the introduction, we're not gonna say a whole lot more stuff. Did you want to add anything more that Angie said?
No, I mean, we can definitely answer any questions about answer bar at the end. Why don't we leave it at the end? We'll give a better brief overview then.
Right. This is all about everybody here and getting started in their business. So, as Angie said, we've done this session a number of times. We've added one little set of slides, Angie. So the HR admin is new. We're going to talk a little bit about workforce planning, which is if you are looking at hiring in the next little while, or you've started to hire, workforce planning is super important. We're going to touch a little bit on recruiting. We do an entire workshop on recruiting, so we're only going to touch on it a little bit. Some key things you should know. Once you get them, you want to introduce them and get them ramped up, and you want to keep them. So onboarding is a key part of retaining employees in the first 3 months for sure. And then hopefully the life goes along well, but divorce happens. So terminations are something that we will also touch on. People leave voluntarily. People leave because they don't fit your organization anymore. And we're going to touch a little bit on how to do that and hopefully stay out of legal trouble. And I have to figure out how to move my slides. Sorry. So the first slide for HR admin is payroll stuff. So HR admin, we call it the boring stuff because you have to know, you have to do it. It's a little dull, but if you do it right, it saves you tons of anxiety, tons of effort, and tons of trouble. CRA, for those of you who've set up your business, you will have gotten a business number. You also need to register if you're going to hire for a payroll number. Exactly the same place. Go add a payroll number. It doesn't cost you anything, doesn't take any time, you just register. Important part here is once you do hire, you have to file, and you have to file within the CRA required timeframes, or there are penalties, and they are not cheap. The next thing we want you to keep in mind is payroll processing. Who's going to do your payroll? There are tons of great services out there. We would recommend using a service, but if you've got a great bookkeeper, often they can do it. If you do have somebody doing your finance, they can do it. Important part is payroll needs to be done right and needs to have a huge amount of attention to detail. We don't recommend that you as the founder do it. Find someone to do it for you because it's complicated. And it's not so easy as paying somebody a few $1,000s a month. There's rules. I think that's it. WorkSafe BC. Oh, pay statements. Once you do set up your pay, check your pay statements. It's super important to follow a couple of things. One is vacation needs to be separated on your pay statement. That's something you ask either your bookkeeper or your service to make sure it is highlighted because it needs to be separate from the regular pay and regular deductions. It needs to show how much vacation has been banked or earned, and then when it comes off, it's paid as vacation pay. That's a BC rule. And that's because we have an obligation as employers to pay out at least 2 weeks and 3 if they've been with us for a little bit longer. If you haven't already done it, once you have employees, you need to have WorkSafe BC. Rules in Canada or in BC, you should have a WorkSafe BC number if you have contractors coming on site, unless you can verify that they have their own WorkSafe BC and a certificate to prove it. Doesn't cost a lot, but WorkSafe BC is something you're going to need to register for. You go online to WorkSafe BC and you're good to go there. BC's health tax. This is new. We used to have MSP, and it used to be employee paid unless the employer paid it. So the BC health tax is something that you have to sign up for as well. You can go online to the BC government, but if your revenue, it's really revenue driven. If your revenues are above 500,000 per year, you have to register online through, it's called eTax BC. If you're below that, then you do not have to at this point in time. Next slide, Steph.
Oh, sorry, there is one question related to this, which is just if you have a list of
Sure.
recommended payroll service providers in BC and how much does it usually cost if you report monthly?
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you say that again?
Sure. Do you have a list of, this is from James, do you have a list of recommended payroll service providers in BC? How much does it usually cost if you report monthly?
We do have a list, James. If we'll keep track of you and send you something afterwards. There's a bunch in BC that are great. There's a number across Canada. Cost, Steph, do you remember the cost? I think they charge you a monthly fee, and then per employee, if I'm not mistaken, it's like $2.50 per employee per processing, and a flat fee to do it. But Steph, I
Yeah,
can't remember the numbers.
I can't remember the numbers either, and I'm hesitant to give them without looking for the sole purpose that this, especially in the payroll space, it's evolving quickly in the same way that all HR tech is. I mean, it's you don't have to go to the big guns anymore like Ceridian. There's a lot of smaller organizations tailored for early growth companies that have better pricing models, which we're seeing all over the place. So definitely we can answer that question and give you more details on it, but I would want to check because I haven't checked lately and I know it's changing. It's a changing landscape for sure.
All right. Anthony says they use rise.xyz
Mhm.
for what it's worth.
Rise is great for sure.
Yep.
They used to be Pay Savvy for anybody that may have known them a few years ago, and then they changed to Rise. They're great.
Okay.
They, they
And
sit at the top of the list for sure.
then Barry Scott, she's wondering, do you register for WorkSafe BC even for remote work?
Yes, any employee.
Okay.
Interesting note there. If you have employees working remotely, the home office is an extension of your work office, and you are actually responsible for the safety of your workers in their home office. Technically, you're supposed to be checking where they work to make sure that bookshelves aren't going to fall on them, that their desk is safe. But yeah, definitely for remote workers.
Yeah.
Um, there are a couple of questions really asking about how to separate vacation and stuff that seem might be a little bit specific. Well, maybe we'll circle back on those at the end if we have time. Otherwise, a great way to do it is to ask here. Is it still the first question free on answer bar?
First two.
Yes.
First two questions free on answer bar, and that's also another good way. And then one more question: BC Health Tax is separate from MSP, or is it additional?
It is the replacement.
Okay.
I'm going to say that MSP no longer exists. BC Health Tax is the replacement of that.
Okay. And sorry, one more question. All the
No
questions
problem.
have already begun.
This happens every time and it's okay.
Yes. For WorkSafe BC registering, that do interns or co-ops also apply?
Run that list. Say that list again.
Interns and or co-ops, so students.
Interesting. If the students or the interns come from a registered university and the registered university covers them and it's a government certified co-op program, then the university will cover them. But if you have other employees, you're going to get covered anyways. But if they don't come from a certified university or school, so there's some small colleges or English language institutes, they are not covered and you would have to have WCB.
Okay, and then what about independent contractors?
Yes, you're supposed to have WCB for them. As I mentioned that earlier, I think I mentioned it. Independent contractors should have their own WCB coverage up to a certain amount of liability, and you should check and ask for it. And depending on the work they're doing, you should go to WCB and ask if you can get a certificate of exemption for those contractors. It's easier just to pay the small amount of money to WCB and be covered for the liability. If your contractor has their own liability and they can show it to you, you can take that chance and not get it if it's your one and only contractor.
Okay, I think we're good for now.
All right. Boom. There you go.
Okay, employee file. So once you hire someone as an employee, we do it also for our contractors and our co-ops and anybody else coming in. We always keep track of who they are, what they are. But for sure with employee files, you are legally required to. So one thing to note right off the bat, if you have an employee file, your employees can ask to see it. So be mindful what you put in there and don't put anything silly in writing in that file. In general, you should keep their signed employment agreement. Please make sure your employees sign their employment agreements. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone into an employee file and said, "Okay, where's the most recent agreement?" "Oh, here it is." "Oh, we don't have a signed copy," and therefore it doesn't become a valid copy. Steph's got her hand up.
That's how this is how we're gonna interrupt each other. We're gonna actually be pretty diplomatic now that we can't just do it side by side. Make sure the employee file is signed before the person starts work. There is
Yes.
there's some gray area if somebody signs a contract without consideration after they start, whether or not it's valid. So just do it before, even if
Yeah.
it's a second before they start.
Yeah, exactly. So the employment agreement needs to be kept on file, the signed one. Any onboarding forms that you have, and when we talk about onboarding forms, you need their banking information to pay them. If you have benefits, you'll need the benefits sign up form. If you have a parking garage and they need to sign a toggle out, you'll need that form in there. We keep the emergency contact information. Um, so those are your onboarding forms. Always keep a copy of their resume. As you get into working with your employee, keep copies of any performance discussions as well as performance reviews. So if someone does something wrong, you want to document that. Be careful what you write down, but put it in their file. If someone does something lovely, put that in their file. Um, we also recommend that essential signed policies go into the employee file. And when we talk about that, you should have a code of conduct that is signed annually. You should have a harassment and bullying or bullying and harassment policy that is signed annually. What else, Steph?
No, it, there's standard ones that you need to have, like you said, like bullying and harassment. But people, you know, in we're going to get to this, but separating your policies from sort of procedures is important here. So some people have PEP policies, travel policies. So if you travel for work, you want people signing off that they've read and agreed to things that involve money or safety. Health and some people have signed health and safety procedures or inclusion policies, right? I abide.
Yep, yep.
The list is ever growing in a positive way, but realistically, as we go through these two HR admin slides, we're talking to you about it, but we have lists of saying, okay, have these 5 things, because we do through the system, people come and we help them do their foundation HR admin, and we send them a checklist. Have this, this, and this, and then anything up and beyond that would be specific to what you culturally want to do.
Exactly.
Just a quick question related to that from Tanya. As we move into a digital world, is it still a requirement to have hard copy employee files?
No, it is not. If you do have hard copy, they need to be kept in a fireproof, waterproof, locking safe. So many companies are moving away from that. But then you have to ensure that the files are secure. But no, you don't have to have hard copies anymore.
Yeah.
All right. Where am
You
I?
good?
Trying to jump from thing to thing.
Just checking. Yep.
Yeah, we're good for now.
Okay. All right. So we're going to jump into workforce planning. The reason that we touch on workforce planning, which seems awfully strategic for early growth, is because it costs money to do things wrong in so many different ways. So one of the biggest mistakes we see right off the bat with early growth is people being behind the 8 ball. All of a sudden, there's more work, not enough people, and they go and they hire somebody. But when you're in that situation, you often don't hire the right person for the right role that makes sense either in the long term or even in the short term. So doing the planning ahead of time, even if it's not correct and changes frequently, you at least have something to refer to when the time comes when you're like, I need to hire somebody. So that's why we put it right up here after HR admin, because it actually is that important. So this is an organic living plan that you'll put together, and many things will influence it. Your business development, and depending on your business, depending on what skill set all of a sudden you find that you're lacking. In this case, maybe payroll, right? So what we recommend at the very basics of it is kind of your wish list. If this goes well from a business development perspective. This is what our hiring plan is going to look like. These are the skills we need. And this is how many of each that we think we're going to need. And you want to start looking at it with this high vision. And then you need to put some numbers around it. Okay. Oh, wow. I'm going to need 5 people. And you're going to look at them and say, okay, is that a junior person? Is that an intermediate or a senior person? How much is that going to cost? You're going to go online. You're going to start to research all of this. You may not be 100% correct, but you're going to get some numbers and you're going to start putting numbers down. And then you're going to total it all together and say, wow, I need $500,000 worth of payroll. And you say, wow, I don't have that. And then you start to be creative. Maybe some of those are going to be contractors. Maybe a senior level person is only going to be part-time. Maybe you're going to hire more juniors in the beginning, or an intern, to help support the numbers that you can attain and get as much of the skill set you need to achieve your growth. So this is what we call the workforce plan. Once you take a look at it and make the modifications to create as much affordability as you can, you want to think of one additional thing: succession planning, which again seems a little forward thinking. But the reality is, when you create a role and you put a junior person in it, what's their next role? Right? So we spend all this time, we put this plan together, we go and we hire people. If we hire for the wrong jobs that people can't grow, well, essentially it can be a lost hire. Or if we hire positions that don't have any, you hire a full-time employee that really should be a contractor. Well, maybe you need that senior resource, and what they're doing for you, you don't need them anymore past a year. Allison.
I was just going to interject and say, and don't overpromise. If you, as Steph said, if you hire a junior and you want to, they're going to come to you in 6 months to a year and say, I've figured this out. What's my next role? Do I get more money? And you're thinking they're great. They're going to stay in that role for 3 years. Careful what you promise. Say to them, there's no progression yet in our company. If, with our planned growth, you're going to be doing this role for a year to 2 years, maybe 3. And if they're not happy up front, they're not the right hire for you right now. You can say, if we grow, the world's your oyster. There's lots going on, but careful what you promise.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. And also, in hiring junior, the second thing to think about as well, and often people hire junior when they don't have a lot of money, but if you don't have anyone to train them, you either have a very bright junior who figures it out, which is, we touch on that in recruiting, but what you essentially don't live up to your promise. I mean, people who don't have the ability to learn and grow often don't stay. So these are all the things to consider. It's a little bit all over the place because there are so many considerations, but it's actually pretty methodical in looking at positions, looking at the different levels, looking at how much they cost, and matching them alongside what your needs are, and then finding balance. And then start working towards it. And then change it as often as you need to. But at the very least, have it in place so that you can reference it when you need to and not get caught.
Oh, are we there already?
Oh, nope, sorry.
All right.
Well, we are now. Anyways, was there any questions on workforce planning?
Not as of yet.
Okay, great.
All right. And this leads into it.
Yeah. So if you do hire somebody, you have to make that decision right off the bat whether you're going to hire an employer or a contractor. And understanding that intent is really important. It'll dictate whether you use an employment agreement or an independent contractor agreement. But CRA is going to want to know what's going on. First and foremost, what's your intent? Are you intending to hire an employee? Are you intending to hire an independent contractor? And then there are 7 tests that CRA is going to look at. Unfortunately, none of them are black or white. One of them could outweigh another. So when I run through these tests that are out there, none of them are going to make a decision one way or another. If you get asked by CRA why you've hired an independent contractor when they deem them an employee, you will be liable for all CPP, EI for both you and the employee for as long as you hired them. So it's really important to get this right. If you hire an independent contractor, treat them like an independent contractor. If you hire an employee, then go forward and you'll pay all your EI and CPP. So it's hard to pay for all of those costs. So just be careful. When in doubt, really what we say is hire an employee. But if you want to hire an independent contractor, here's the things you need to know. Do they bring their own equipment? If yes, CRA will say, good, that's a point in the favor of being an independent contractor. But due to data and security these days, lots of companies provide that equipment and that access. So that one becomes not relevant because it could be either an independent contractor or an employee. Do you control their work? Basically, do you say to them, I need you to mow that patch of lawn, and they bring their lawnmower and off they go and they mow the lawn? You're not providing any direction about how high, how long, when they do it, what time they do it. So that's the control of the work. In a tech environment, it's really hard to say that a developer who's sitting beside an employee is not an employee if he's an independent contractor, unless you've clearly said they're here to do this piece of work, this front end, this web portal, this piece of work, and then they're going to go away. In going away, they should have multiple clients. So CRA is going to say, do you have multiple clients? Where do you get all your income from? If you get it from one company for more than 6 months in the year, CRA is going to dig deeper. If they have multiple clients over the course of the year, you're going to be fine. Help me.
Yep, for sure.
What else?
In a perfect world, they're incorporated.
Right.
That's another really great. So at the top, incorporation, end date. There needs to be an end date. We see often contracts in perpetuity, like it's a no. End date. You can put a master agreement in place with the contractor. You can even do it for a year if you have long-term projects, but you want to issue statements of work for each project that they're doing. You want to create this division that's clear cut between an employee and a contractor. Exactly what Allison said. This person's, and even if they don't have another client at that time, as long as there's an end date with a specific project that you need their skill set for, and they're not doing the same thing as an employee sitting right beside them, then you're fine. If you have somebody doing a job sitting beside an employee doing the same thing, but you can say, I needed an extra help for 6 weeks, that would also be okay. But make sure it ends in 6 weeks and you reissue another contract. You don't just roll it forward without an end date.
So those are they're on the CRA website. The first and foremost thing is, what was your intention? CRA will come and ask questions. They will make your life miserable if you do it wrong. And the back penalties are huge. I worked with a company where they hired everybody on contract for the first 5 years. Then they forgot to pay their workers or their WorkSafe BC amounts, which triggered a search. Then CRA got involved and they paid $50,000 in back penalties, and CRA is ruthless. So be careful.
And we should have said this at the beginning as well. Yes, we have lists, but we also have all these agreements. We have employment agreements, we have contractor agreements, you name it, or you're not sure, is this going to pass? We actually get this question fairly often. Are we in trouble if we do X? And then we can look at it and go, it's a bit gray. You might want to think about doing this, right? So, but if you don't have agreements, ask us. We are happy to send them your way.
Awesome. I have one question.
Yeah.
Is it seamless to move a person from a contractor to an employee? For example, if they complete a project and you want them to continue as an employee thereafter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you just have to, we're going to say the same thing, and interrupt me if I'm not saying what you were going to say, but you just have to have that clear break. One thing ends before the other thing starts. Now you go, Allison.
Yeah, Steph's correct. If the work went on for 6 months to a year as an independent contractor and then you rolled them to an employee, you're probably fine. CRA, if you got somehow flagged, if somehow CRA figured you out, they may go back and say, well, why weren't they an employee to begin with? So to Steph's point, do a clear end of some work and then say, yeah, we wanted to hire them. Most of the time, you're going to be fine. You're better off going from a contractor to an employee. And you are certainly in serious trouble if you go from an employee to a contractor. So if you're going to if you have to downsize and then you want to keep somebody on board as a contractor afterwards, that one is a little trickier and you have to be way more clear.
Yes. You have to be, and the reason it's trickier because it does happen. It's not like, I mean, there's business uncertainties, or even people want to, maybe they don't want to work full time anymore. They want to work hourly. They want to go back to school part time. So it is common, but to your point, you want to create that. To Allison's point, sorry, you really need to create that end of your employee responsibility, your employer responsibilities to that person before you, and then make it very clear on a new agreement what your obligations are to them as a contractor. I think what you're trying to avoid, Allison, is them coming back and saying, because if you do that, if something goes sour down the road, sometimes they will look at the duration they were your employee and your contractor as their length of service. Right, Allison? Like that's your main risk there.
Yeah.
All right. And then just add on to that, what about contractors working in the US?
Contractors in the US, so I'm not sure about the what if. So a contractor working in the US should be a contractor who is independent and invoices you. If you go down the employee route there, then you have to have an entity in the US. Depends on your scenario, and you can hire payroll processors down there. If you've got, yeah, I'm going to leave it at that because it's a complicated topic. If you've got a contractor in the US, you are less likely to grab the attention of CRA, as long as that contractor doesn't suddenly try and bill or get something from Canada. So we've had a scenario where a Canadian living in the US wants to work for a Canadian company, gets hired as an independent contractor, and then comes home and applies for EI. Then you've raised the attention of CRA. So if they're just a US citizen who is doing work for you remotely, as long as you have an independent contractor agreement and the invoice, you're very low on the radar of CRA.
Great. And just to follow on, you mentioned the templates. What's the best way for people to access those?
Send a question.
You just send it. You just ask us a question. You tell us what you want through the system. We'll send it to you.
Okay. So go to answer bar.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay. Steph mentioned earlier, I'm doing this one, right, Steph?
It doesn't matter. Go for it.
You sure?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't remember.
That's okay.
No, you go.
It's sort of I'm just looking at it now. It's a bit of a follow-on to workforce planning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talked about when you're putting your workforce plan together, what will it cost? Well, this is what you got to go figure out. And so there's two things that we talk about cost. You know, it's hard to know when you're sitting there, and if you've never hired for a position, what it's worth in the marketplace. But there are ways now, long gone are the days that you have to only depend on a salary survey that you buy for a couple grand. You can go online to a bunch of different places and just from PayScale to Glassdoor to there's LinkedIn Salary now, there's you name it, and we have a list of them. You can go in and you can put in positions for your particular area, and they'll give you the average salary. And it's a good way to do some research. And the next way you start to find out what you need to pay people is when you start interviewing them and you start asking them what their salary expectations are. And between your research and what they tell you, you're going to start to find out what these positions cost. When we look at it, there's what we call fair market value, which is what you'll gain a perspective on from the research that you do and from what people start telling you they want. And so you want to pay fair market value. Everyone says that, pay fair market value. What is that? The truth is, if you think about it as 100%, it's a sliding scale. It depends on your company. There are some companies that only pay 50% fair market value. Some are in the 95 percentile. It really depends on their industry, what they need to pay. Does it dictate who's a better employer? No, because on the second point here, compensation is all about the entire package. It's not just about what the base salary is. So even though you're doing your research on your base salary and maybe you'll get some bonus information, it's not as easy to get information on the entire compensation package. So when we're talking about compensation package, we're talking about base. And you don't have to have all of these. These are just some things that are included. So base salary, bonuses, there could be share options, there could be benefits, even the vacation, how much vacation you give, um, is looked at as part of the compensation package, albeit off to the side. So when you're shaping compensation, base salary is only a portion of it. So for those companies that say can only pay 50 in the 50 percentile average, well, there's other things they can do within their compensation package that makes it just as attractive potentially as an employer who's paying 95%. And not everyone joins a company based on what the base salary is. They look at the entire package. So why this is relevant is for early growth companies, they often don't have that 95 percentile. In fact, a lot of the time they need a senior level resource that should be paid $110,000 a year and they've got 75. So how do you get those people to come on board? And that's why we bring up this slide. You know, don't just look at that 110,000 and think you need to have it. Look at compensation as, you know, part of the someone's coming to work for me. What can I give them? And also, what do people want? When people come to work for early growth companies, they're looking for an opportunity of some sort. They're not expecting a massive benefit package and $110,000 a year. They're looking to be involved in creating something. So you be creative in how you build your compensation package. And we often say using options in the beginning is a really great way to make up the gap you may have in what you can pay in base salary and benefits and other perks that may come with a more mature company. I'm going to stop because Allison's, were you looking? Are you good?
No, you're good. I was wanted to expand on your comment about if you've got somebody who wants to come in who's come out of an Amazon or a Microsoft or an Apple that's making $250,000 to $300,000 a year in the tech world, and you're a startup, and I'm never going to be able to pay that. Steph hit on something super important. Why are they leaving? They're probably tired of being a cog in the wheel. They're tired of the politics. They're tired of the bureaucracy. They're tired of doing one thing over and over and over again. Who knows? Ask them why and ask them what they need. And maybe they need to work part-time, but because they're senior and they know what they're doing, maybe in part-time they can get done what a junior or an intermediate would get done in full-time. So to Stephanie's point, don't be afraid to ask them why they're applying to you and what it is that they need. And you may be able to accommodate what they need without it having to hit your bottom line as hard as that.
Yeah.
And Steph, did you mention options?
Yes, options is the best. Is the best way. And even more effective than bonus in as making up if you whatever would potentially be lacking in your competitive compensation. But you know, I mean, often people come to early growth for that purpose as well. It's really nice to work somewhere that you have a financial stake in the game. It also cements a different kind of relationship with employees as well. I mean, options in itself is a whole other topic, but it does raise the point that when you think you don't have anything to give, you actually have a lot to give. And you're aligning what you have to give with the motivations and wants of the people coming to you. So this is more about changing a mindset about compensation than it is just so people don't feel defeated. This is a really creative process right now. And you don't need pool tables and you don't need beer Fridays and you don't need, you know, what you think you may need to be competitive when you look out in the marketplace. And more importantly, don't offer things you can't afford. I mean, you know, yes, you need talent and yes, you need to be able to attract people, but you know, figure out why someone would want to work with you and then build a package around that about the needs and the wants of people that you're talking to.
I'm going to pause you there, Steph. I'm going to add about benefits, but I think I saw a couple of questions, Angie. Is there anything you want to throw in there?
Yeah, this is all probably somewhat related to the full compensation package. First, Kim's asking, what do you recommend startups do around sick days? The ESA says 3 unpaid days off.
Employment standards just changed to 3 paid for COVID-related sicknesses, and that will come into effect as 3 paid for any sickness as of January. So so what's interesting is those 3 paid, you pay as the employer, but then you get it back from the government. So the government's sponsoring this paid sick leave program, and it's going to be in flux for the next 2 years. There's a lot of argument around it's better for the employer if employees stay home and don't bring sickness to work. But for some employers, that's going to be hard. So we're going to see this unravel over the next year or two. For tech companies where people can work from home, and you ask them to, if they're working for, if they work in the office and they can go home and they just have a stuffy head and you don't want them to spread germs in the office, they can go home and work. And can they work? Sure. Then they don't take a sick day. In the big picture, we support people being paid to be off sick for a period of time. But then you have an administration management. How many days do they get? Do you keep track of them? Do they need doctor's notes? All that stuff. Steph, go ahead.
Yeah. So we're big proponents of paid time off. So instead of sort of saying you get X amount of sick and X amount of vacation you need to track, but personal days, figure out what you can afford. People, the reality is people are going to get sick. People are going to have appointments. Kids are going to be kept home from school. This is going to happen. There's no way around it, period. Right. And, this is also the relationship the employee has with you. Right. So, you want an employee to work for you, but you also have to be understanding that the employee has a life. So in finding that balance, figure out what you can afford. Like, can you afford 3? Great. Make them paid time off. If someone needs time off, they say, I need time off. Do you want to manage what it's for? Like, realistically, if the whole point here is to trust your employees, do you want to, so we try not to label them and allow people to be grown-ups and use them. If they're going to need more time because they've had a crisis, you want them to come to you and have that conversation with you. And then you can make a decision what you want to do past that. But as a base policy, having anywhere from 3 to 5 days of paid time off what someone needs is reasonable.
Yeah, stop there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, next. Do you have any advice on the right proportion of options to provide for different roles in a startup environment?
Not touching it. That's everybody's different. I would ask your accountant. I would ask your lawyer. I mean, you can go with packages I've set up. You give more to the seniors, you give less to the intermediates, less to the juniors. You can have a grid that says, everybody who earns up to 50,000 gets 20. But what's your option pool? What's your option value? Where are you at in your revenue stream, in your growth? Yeah, I can't.
It is but it is common to have a leadership level and then an employee-based level, similar to down the road when you have benefits. Often senior level critical roles to an organization are highly insured differently than regular employees. So not regular employees, but others that you could replace more easily. So, but being a company who has set one up, and we set ours up before we even needed it. They are simple to set up, and you can just get the basic plan. You have to put a little forethought into it, but not too much. And as long as you've got your numbers right, which legally lawyers help you, then it's ready to go when you need it. Right? Doing it after the fact you can always set one up whenever, but it can. Sorry, last thing. The only way this can go very, very wrong that I've seen is when you're inconsistent. All right. This is an optics thing as well as it is a compensation reward thing. So companies that have implemented it late, have not included anyone, hasn't had sound business logic to the reasons they've done, have made a lot of people angry. So it's that sentiment. What are you setting it up for? What's your intent? Who's included? Are you inconsistent? Find that level of issue with it and make sure that part's clean and leave the numbers up to somebody else.
One last comment on that is that if you set up an option agreement or a grant agreement, make sure that that agreement has the termination clause in it, because sometimes lawyers leave them out. But you should always have it in and then make the choice to strike it. So what I'm talking about is that if an employee leaves and you've granted them 10,000 shares at whatever value, if they terminate, they have to acquire those shares within a period of time post termination. And that keeps the options coming back into your pool and available for future employees, rather than having a bunch of employees who are no longer part of your organization holding on to options. So that's one tip that
It's a great
I
tip.
suggest there.
Yep. Okay.
Second is corporate structure with the lawyers of Faskin, so they'll be able to talk more about that. Uh,
Perfect.
Exactly.
Yay.
yeah, and one last question: what about volunteers? Is it a must to pay them or compensate them? What is the law in BC around this?
We just answered this not too
We
long ago.
just answered this. You go, Steph.
Yeah. Oh, oh,
So volunteers, we have a belief that you should always pay people for work. It keeps you safe. If someone wants to come and volunteer, you're going to need to have workers' comp in place, and then you have a bunch of rules you have to follow. They cannot volunteer next to an existing employee because that would be considered work. The only work that they can do, Steph, make sure I say this right.
Yeah,
The
I
only
know.
work they can do is work that is going to help them learn,
yep.
or that you can show that you're providing training on. But if they are actually doing work that benefits you, and that's the key there, it's work that benefits you,
Yep.
then you have to pay them. So yeah, you can have volunteers, but be super careful where you cross the line between what you're training or that they're working.
Absolutely. And whoever asked that question, ask it, because there's more points that we're raising off the top of our head. And it's we can send that to you, and then you can just make sure that you check all the boxes before doing that. Because there's other relationships you can have, temporary, you can have internships, different things. Okay.
All right, that's it for now.
All right. You wanted to say something about benefits, and were you thinking along the lines of this is the only thing I would say on it. It's if you can't afford benefits, which a lot of early growth companies can't, but you can afford a health spending account, goes a long way with people, even if it's only $500 a year per employee. So don't think about benefits as the traditional package. There are so many other options these days that you can put together that are a lot more affordable, that employees appreciate. They're not expecting you to have what Amazon has. Okay.
And with health spending accounts, you can either administer it yourself, or you can actually go to an organization and have a health spending account administered by a third party.
Totally.
They're a great way for startups to provide some money for other healthcare stuff or perks.
Exactly. All right.
Okay, I'm being mindful of time. We are getting lots of questions through, so we're going to keep going past the 1 hour as we go through this, but feel free to keep asking questions. So we're going to touch on recruiting.
2:30, so we're good.
Yeah. I just didn't want to have to do a hard stop at 1 and open up the floor to questions. We're going to go over that hard stop at 1. So if you are in a position to be starting to hire, we're going to give you some tips on hiring. Our biggest tip, our biggest thing that we believe in is look for smart, adaptable people who fit your culture, and they will figure everything else out. As a small company, as a startup, what you want to hire somebody for today could very likely be different in 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years. But you want those people to stay with you as they develop their IP for you, what your business does. They're gonna change with you, and they're gonna grow with you. But if you hire someone who can only do one thing and that's all they ever want to do, and that changes in your business, then you're going to have to fire them and hire somebody else, and that is a time suck. So hire smart, adaptable people and let them grow with you. That's our biggest thing that we can share with you today. Now, if you are getting into recruiting, these are just some tips on recruitment. So remember that recruitment is selling. It is no different than your sales team selling your product or your service. Recruitment is selling what you do to the people out there who need to learn about it. So understand what your pitch is when you're recruiting. What does your company do? How do they do what they do? What is the role and why is it valuable? Make sure whatever marketing you do online aligns with your sales marketing, so that there is a brand awareness being developed. Be aware of what you're going to say to candidates and be consistent. So know what your mission, vision, and values are. Be prepared to speak about either the culture that you want to develop or that you have already developed, and speak to the environment. Steph mentioned this earlier. Do you have a beer fridge? Do you have a foosball table? Like, what is the environment that you want to create? Is it kind of a bit fun and laid back? Is there a dress code? Do you have to deal with clients? Like, what is it that you want people to understand so that the expectations are clear when you show up? Um, that's it for that one.
Yep, absolutely.
When you're going out to find talent, there are a couple of ways to do it. You can post and pray, which I'm a tech recruiter from way back, and I actually find the post and pray super offensive by people who believe that you can only find good people through headhunting. There are so many great job boards out there today, and all of our talent is digital savvy, particularly in the tech world. They're watching the job boards, they're watching them all the time. And so by posting on relevant job boards, it's not so much praying, it's more a bit of work for you to wade through the whack of resumes that come in to find that gem that's in there. So, use the Indeeds, in BC, use the BC Tech jobs, use the TNet job postings, stay local if you can, use special interest groups. If you have the time, you can headhunt. It takes time, but always as a founder or an executive in a small company, you should be having coffee, or in this day and age with COVID, you should be staying connected with people who might be an opportunity for you to hire in the future. So have those coffee chats, have those email exchanges. Always be open to students that approach you because they could be amazing down the road. If you have the money and you don't have the time to do the search yourself, you can use an agency or a recruiter. Going fees right now are 25% for a search. If you want to do a headhunting search, it's anywhere from 30 to 35%. You can find recruiters who will charge less. Some admin roles can go for as low as 12. Some manufacturing and industrial roles can go for 15 to 18. But on average, you're going to be paying for a developer 20 to 25% of their base salary upon start date. And the guarantees suck right now. Lots of companies aren't doing much of a guarantee. So be careful where you go when you get into this. We recommend using your network. Talk to other co-founders. Go to career fairs. Depends on the volume of hiring you're doing, but it's work. Like let's be clear, it's a lot of work.
Absolutely. Also, you're often as you start to grow, your employees are your best recruiters.
Yes,
So,
thank you, Steph.
having even if it's just modest, some kind of recruitment reward, I guess, is a great way to motivate people because like-minded people generally hang out together, and often your employees are not going to hire or not going to recommend someone they don't want to work with. So that's a really great way to grow, and also a very safe cultural bit as well.
Yep. One of the other thoughts that I had noted here was if someone approaches you about working for your business, talk to them, have coffee with them if you can. And if they're not right and you do have an open position, ask them who they know. They may know somebody better. I've interviewed people who thought they wanted to come in for a job, and at the end of the interview I've said, this was a great interview, personality, I think you're awesome, but really you're just not the right fit for this role. And sent them away, and expectations were clearly set. They phoned me the next day and they said, wow, I really enjoyed that interview, you were super honest, I agree, that's not the right role for me, but my roommate would be perfect. And they sent me that resume. So the old shampoo commercial, somebody knows two people who know two people who know two people. It's so true in recruiting.
I have no idea how you pulled that out. I have no idea. Do you remember the brand of shampoo?
Perk. I don't know. It was green.
You're dating yourself. It's great. All right.
Us, I remember that. Josh is asking any recommendations for headhunter or recruiters, particularly in the chemical industry.
No, not. I mean, I could go do some looking around. Maybe Henry Goldbeck at Goldbeck Recruiting. He's been around forever. I think he does industrial manufacturing. He might do chemical. You might want to look in Alberta because they have lots of geochemical and chemical engineering companies that do engineering recruiting specifically. And there's lots of people out there who are looking. But I don't know, Steph. I don't know anybody else besides Henry who does chemical.
No, I don't either. But one thing too, when you go on LinkedIn and you search for recruiters, I mean, the independent recruiter network is massive, right? You can post on one of the independent recruiter groups saying, I'm looking for, a recruiter who does X. And what you may luck out is find an independent recruiter who has actually recruited in this space who will charge you hourly to do it for you. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, a big one. But to Allison's point, you might need a big one because this is specific and quite niched.
Yeah, one of the things you could do is go on Indeed, go on maybe Monster, go on LinkedIn, and look and see for the type of job you're hiring for if there are any recruiters who are posting those jobs, and then give them a call and basically interview them and see if you like them.
That's smart. That's a good way to do it too.
Oh, an update. Apparently, it was not Pert Plus. It was Fabergé Organics, according to Paul.
Well done, whoever that was.
Thank you.
Well,
That sounds way better.
Yes, Fabergé sounds way more
better.
sophisticated.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you go out, and you can go next slide, Steph. Once you go out and meet people and you've decided that you like them, again, I'm going to reiterate, recruiting is selling. So you have to close them. Remember when you're talking to people that it's not all about, can you do the job? Are you going to be good for me? How are you going to contribute to me? The candidate's listening to you and saying, do I want this job? What are you going to give me? How are you? And the millennials that are out there these days, they are asking those questions. What's in it for me? And so be aware that if you find somebody that you like, you have to be able to close them. Tips to close. This holds true today, even more so than it did years ago. People make decisions on hiring both the company and the candidate based on gut. And the shocking stat is 80% gut feel, 20% logic. People are influenced by how they feel about you. Do I like them? Do I like what I'm hearing? So as you're talking to candidates, figure out what appeals to them. What's going to motivate them, and talk to them about that. Don't overpromise, and don't be afraid to walk away. Put it in writing, whatever you decide. And first and foremost, as we said before, hire smart, hire people who fit your culture, and they'll figure it out. Yeah, it's an emotional thing. I'm good there, Steph.
Sorry, last thing, as the employer, try to be more, raise your percentage on the logic side. Okay. Use your workforce plan to know what you're hiring for. Don't hire someone because you think they're super cool and you want to work with them. Make sure they can do the job.
Yeah, if you like someone, when I'm recruiting, I sit down with someone, I think, oh yeah, they're good, they communicate well, they're going to fit the team, they're going to fit this culture, and then I prove it through the facts. Can they actually do the job? Are they good at coding? Do they test their code? Do they work well in a team? Like, you got to ask yourself all those facts. Good point, Steph.
Totally. Well, I think it's kind of what we said when we started workforce planning there. People get in a bind and they hire someone because they're like, we could have beers on Friday. I like you. And it's like,
yeah, maybe not.
Maybe not.
More about the beers.
Yeah. All right. Are we good to move?
Yep.
Great. Onboarding.
You're up.
All right. So you convince them. You close them. They're coming on board. So welcome to the honeymoon phase. So we get this question a lot. Do you need an onboarding process? And it's yes, like yes, 1,000 times yes, even if you're small, because it's the first impression. Like, people, you need to manage expectations always. But more importantly, when someone shows up, whether it's work from home, which is even more complicated, or comes into the office on their first day, you want to manage their expectations. There's nothing worse than showing up without your laptop isn't ready. You don't know how to log in. You don't know where you're sitting. It's awkward. You're walking around. You don't know where you have to go if you have to go pee. Like, it's just awkward, right? And then all of a sudden you're looking for someone, do I have to sign my employment agreement? So be organized and have an onboarding process, have a plan. And that's the admin side. So we use an onboard checklist. So if you need one, we'll send you one. And just make sure that you check all the boxes, set up the employee files, make sure they know where their desk is, make sure they have the right equipment, make sure they have a fob, make sure they know how to open the parking garage, where the bathrooms are. All those really pedantic administrative stuff make such a huge difference, because the person thinks you were expecting them, right? Often busy startups, that gets missed. It's like, great, I'm so glad you're here. We're super busy, and like they're thrown into the fire, which can work for some people, but it's not the best first impression.
Hey, wait, Steph, put up my hand.
Yeah,
I'm going to
yeah.
introduce a true story. This happened to me early in my career. I got a job with a very, very large international company. I arrived on my first day. Some lovely receptionist walked me in, took me to my office. It was empty. No computer, nothing. It was a desk and a chair. I sat there for 45 minutes. A secretary at that time, admin to one of the partners, walked in and said, "If you want a pencil or a pen, it's on the 7th floor. Get it yourself," and walked out. The
Welcome to the
partner who I
team.
was reporting to did not show up for 4 hours.
Oof.
I lasted a year. But true story. Like, nobody looked at me, nobody came by to say hi, no computer, nothing. They were so unprepared. It was terrible.
100%. It's like, well, nothing says welcome to the team than being ignored, right? And so, yeah, make a fuss about it. Send an email. Even if there's only 3 other people working there, make sure everyone gets up and says, hi, how are you? Knows who their name are, knows who they're coming from. Send out an email before this person arrives saying, Sandra's arriving on Thursday. Be on your best behavior. We want her to stay. We think she's great. Be funny, whatever. Make sure people know she's coming and that you are ready for them. So their first 45 minutes is much different than Allison's. And then the second part, once you've done the administrative side, you're organized, they have a computer, they know how to log in, they're feeling comfortable. You've done all the administrative work. Manage what their next day, week, 2 weeks, month is going to be. So they know, who am I going to get training? What am I supposed to accomplish? Is someone taking me for lunch? Give them a plan. So this requires you just to sit down ahead of when this person comes on, formally or informally, and just put a plan in place that you can communicate to this person. Because what you're really trying to do, other than making them comfortable, is making them productive as fast as you possibly can, because clearly you need them. So how much information they need to know on the company, how much information they need to know about their job. So we're going to move forward here and teach you how to get hires productive and minimize them leaving your company. Because what is that? Maybe we have a crazy stat, and I don't think it's on here. Or I always say, because I think it's here because you say it every time.
Oh, it's 70%. You're talking about employee. Yeah.
Yeah.
So who did this? Might have been Hayes or Robert Half, or somebody did stats. I think it was last year. Well, no, it would have been a year ago. Employees who apply online, so are watching online for job alerts or looking for a new job, their resume is out there. They continue to get job alerts and pings from recruiters and other companies for more than 3 months. And that's 70% of the people out there who start a new job are continuing to look online for the next 30 to 60 days in case that job doesn't work out. Huge number, 70%. That's crazy.
Yeah. So you kind of want to give them a 3-month plan to say, hey, this is what's going down. So we do recommend, as part of, we move this out of HR admin, but it should be in the planning phase, that you have some level of employee playbook. So like an employee manual, or whatever you want to call it. It can just be an online wiki. There really aren't rules for this anymore. I mean, it's not generally a paper copy that gets, you have to sit on your desk and read through, but it should be an online spot for people to be able to look up. It's not where you keep your policies, because the policies were taken care of in the administrative process when the person was hired. But it does reference where to find those policies, whenever an employee wants to reread them. But this is general information, because people want to know how to play in your sandbox. So where are they going to find things? So in this, it's generally information about your company, something inspirational, things they need to know, what kind of background knowledge, how do they request vacation? Do we have paid time off? How are we allowed to use them? What's the performance, like, am I going to get a performance review? How does that go down? Anything that they would want to ask about, they should be able to find. It's like moving into a furnished apartment. Everything's there for you, so you don't have to worry and guess. And also it allows for things to be compliant, because not everybody's version of behavior is your version of behavior. And it's not like in this information packet you say, teach people how to behave, but having a general set of guidelines of how to do things alongside a code of conduct does set that foundation for people to know what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do without saying it in that exact way. Because the reality is, when somebody misbehaves, you need to come back to them and say, hey, whoa, whoa, I'm not allowed to do that. And if they said, I don't know, I didn't know that, that's a problem.
Yeah, I'm going to interject there with
Yeah,
with an example for what Steph's saying is lots of tech companies have core hours. So let's say your core hours are from 10 till 3 or 9 till 3. But people can show up at 7 in the morning if they want to, but between 9 and 3, everybody needs to be available for meetings. Everybody is expected to be answering email and on calls unless they're away. And so if you're an early bird, you may come in and get all of your emails and stuff done 2 hours before the rest of the world is starting meetings. Or you may be a later person and you may stay later and you show up at 9 for the first agile call or meeting, and then you stay later to get your work done later. Everybody's got flexibility there. But if
sure.
you don't state what your core hours are, then somebody may roll in at 10 or 11 and everybody's like, well, where's Joe? Like, why isn't he here? Well, I didn't know. So those are the kinds of things Steph's talking about. There's lots of flexibility, but just state the clarity. And then if Joe never shows up for the 9 o'clock meetings, now you've got a performance issue and you can say, hey, look, you're supposed to be available at 9 o'clock. And it allows you to be clear about what the expectations are.
Totally. You have things like your online code of conduct. What can people post on social media? What, certain email etiquettes, depending on if you're client facing. Maybe you have more of a product base or store retail environment. What's a cell phone policy? Or guidelines around it's less about policy sometimes and more around guidelines of behavior with using technology. Health and safety, facilities. What if I lose my fob? All of those little details. You don't want people coming and asking you every 5 minutes. You want to have it there so people can read this and go, oh, I get it. I know what I'm supposed to do. And it protects you. So just to wrap that up, if you're really, really small, an office policy works. It doesn't have to be big. Maybe there's only 5 things in it, but it's still there for someone to reference. And you can add to it. You just add to it as you grow. New things come up. Something happens. We have a weird thing. Like somebody starts spitting in their garbage can. You're like, wow, we should add that. Let's not do that here. Whatever. And you keep growing this as you go. So a lot of reasons companies and startups don't do this is like, it seems like a massive project. It's not. We have a template. It starts small and you grow it as you need it. But you do need it, so do it. And the reason we suggest don't putting your policies in the handbook is because your policies will change, right? You don't want to be changing this, as much as you're going to grow the handbook. You don't want your policies changing within it all the time. That's
Yep. The general information, Steph, I can't remember if you talked about it. General information is what are our core hours? When is the office open to the public? Or, what time is the parking garage locked? Where's a great place to eat in the neighborhood? What are our holidays that we provide?
When do we get paid?
Steph said earlier, how do you ask for vacation? Like, there's all sorts of things that are non-policy and more just information.
How to.
It's a how-to.
It's a how-to. Also with onboarding as well, very specific to the individual, make sure they understand what their job is. So they applied for this job. There needs to be a job description. That job description is attached to their employment agreement, meaning I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars and you're going to do this. And so make sure that they understand what their job is and how to do it properly. What access do they need on different servers, or who do they need access to ask information? What meetings do they need to attend? Do they know where they are? Are they attached to everybody's calendar they need to be attached to? Who's their direct point of contact when they can't find something? So this goes very much under the productive side of things. Yes, it feels good to know what's going on, but more importantly here, make sure they can do their job. Right?
I have a suggestion that came from one of the guys I worked with for new hires in the tech world. And this was primarily co-ops and interns that came in or junior hires, but it applied to everybody that started. in a tech environment, there's the whole um, uh, your first committing of code that is actually going to go live or going to be inserted into the overall core repository. When that happens and it works, they would call everybody together and they'd give everybody an ice cream sandwich or an ice cream. So they kept ice cream in the freezer, and for new hires or somebody that moved newly into a role, the first time they committed code and it didn't crash the system, there was a little celebration. So those little milestones are super important to partly building your culture, but partly allowing that new hire to realize that they've made a contribution. And that is a big factor in what keeps people there. They understand why they're there, they understand what they're doing, and that they're being recognized when they do it right. So it was a great little way to recognize. Didn't cost them a lot. Everybody loved it. Took 5 minutes, and everybody went back to work.
Totally.
Things like that.
So I'm going to move on, but making sure someone can do their job is probably the number one thing that doesn't happen seamlessly. It can take people up to a week, if not more, to become productive just because people aren't ready for them. So that's a week of time that you could just pay someone to do nothing, or a week of time you can pay them to do a lot. So this is a new slide that we've put in. Working from home's always been a thing. People have always been requesting work from home policies. Some companies have always been more flexible than others. Clearly now, due to COVID, the entire landscape has changed. Not only are people being forced to work from home, it's as a requirement. It's never going to go back to the way that it was before. Meaning, this has helped erase old mentality that if I can't see you, I don't trust you, it means you're not working. And it has also allowed people who have never worked from home to realize that A, I love it, or B, I dislike it. And what businesses are going to have a challenge with is bringing people back into the office unless they can answer the question of why. So sometimes it's very obvious. You do a certain job that requires you to be here for reasons A, B, and C. Then there's some that are less obvious, where realistically, you could do your job from home and you are as productive. It doesn't impede communications or creativity or whatever else. And the employer can't say why, other than I want you back here. And employees are not going to like that. You tell an employee because I want you to, and you're going to demotivate them and they're going to leave you. So what is evolved is going to be this landscape of there's a great word for it, and it's escaped me because it's a new term. I actually read it this morning, and it will come to me. But it's modified something work. It's a new buzz. I don't remember it. But you're going to have all of the above. You're going to have some people working from home, some people in the office, some people doing a little bit of both. So these hybrid models are going to become the norm. In doing so, working from home policies are going to become pretty much a requirement. So I think Allison covered it off in regards to WCB. So in your work from home policy, you're going to have what an employee needs to do to ensure that their workspace is safe. You're going to have to talk to them about any expenses that are covered by you or what they need to do to request a tax receipt. The technology provided, access to data, their VPN, security protocols, the core business hours, like Allison actually just said, if there are levels of flexibility, and when are there not levels of flexibility? Are there check-ins? What meetings do you need to be at? What are okay to miss? How do you book meetings? Who gets invited? All of those things need to be in your work from home. And there's been a lot of great.
Can I interrupt? Those check-in procedures are mandatory under WorkSafe BC. So if you have people working from home, you have an obligation to ensure that they are alive during the period of work hours. So you are required under WorkSafe BC to have people send you a note and say, I'm in or I'm here. You can even use it through their email. They're online now. And then when they leave at the end of the day, because as an employer, if something happens, for God forbid, if they have a heart attack at their desk and they live alone, you're required to be aware of their safety. So this check-in procedure is super important under WorkSafe BC.
Totally. And I think, this is a big learning curve, especially for companies who haven't done it. But it's getting refined, and more people are, now that it's being done in such a mass amount, we're figuring out how to do it better. The policy is just a part of it. But, you know, providing that level of flexibility and allowing people to work when and how they work best is always when they're most productive. Something to keep in mind. But just keep yourself covered here. We have created one. If you need one, let us know. And I think this is the last slide for onboarding here, and it's more of a summary to wrap it up. I think we've made it pretty clear the first 3 months are critical. 70% are looking for new jobs because they don't trust this is going to be great. So talk to your new hires a lot. Check in with them. Give them ice cream sandwiches. And be organized. Have that plan for them. They need to know what they're doing to get up to speed. They need to know if they're doing a good job. And they need to know exactly how to get their questions answered and who to go to when they need something. And use common sense. How would you want to be treated? We have used common sense in here, which is probably not the right way to say it, but what we're really trying to say is put yourself in their shoes. What would you like it to be for yourself? Don't think employer-employee. Just think of, if this was me, how would I be feeling right now? And do a few check-ins. And if you're not sure, go and ask them. And lastly, it's the legal requirement sides of this. Make sure in the onboarding you do your HR admin. I think we've already been pretty dramatic about what was going to happen to you if you don't. So I'll leave it at that.
Good.
Are we good, Andy?
We're getting down to time, so let's move on.
We're on the last slide.
All right. So the honeymoon's over, everybody. You've had these people, you found them, you worked with them, and then you don't like them anymore, or they don't like you, or life happens, as Steph has said in the past. They just have to leave for some reason, but you got to be ready for terminations to happen. Next slide. So terminations come in 2 flavors. They quit or you fire them. No matter what, put your pride aside, treat everybody with dignity, kindness, and respect. I don't care if you hate them. I don't care if you're angry with them. Suck it up and be nice, because you will end up in court faster than you can shake a stick if you misbehave. And it's way easier to take the high road. Even if you're angry, if they showed up and now they know a whole bunch about your business and then they walked away or they stole half your computers, whatever, just suck it up and be careful, because you just don't want to get yourself into trouble.
I'm going to interrupt you. I wish everybody at least asked us before they terminated anybody. Don't assume you know how to do the termination correctly. If you don't ask us, ask somebody. There are complications and things that even regular logic you miss because you don't know when you're not supposed to know. Okay. So that's the first thing. Make sure you're right and you know how to do this properly. Second thing that I want to say about it is that termination, unless there's something nefarious going on and you need to get this person out because there's a risk of some sort, we think of terminations as a conversation, right? This is your big thing, right? You just have a conversation. This isn't working, because it shouldn't be the first. You don't blindside people when you terminate them, right? They know this isn't working out. When people often fire themselves, they know they're not doing a good job. No, you can sit down. Like, it can happen. You sit down and you're like, yeah, so this isn't working. If the person goes, what? You have done something very, very wrong. They should be like, right? And so what you want to do there is, instead of thinking of it as a termination, thinking of it as a peaceful exit. What does this person need to exit this company happy, feeling taken care of, with less risk of lawsuit to you, because anybody can try to sue you for wrongful dismissal just because they feel like it, and it's a pain in the butt. And will they say bad things about you when they walk out the door? So have that conversation. They'll tell you, do you need, you're sitting here, how much do I owe them? Yeah, you legally required to owe them some amount of money, but why don't you ask them how much they need? Often what you were going to pay them, they need less. They're like, actually, you know what? I've actually been looking. So you know what, if I could just have 4 weeks, that would be really helpful. And maybe could you give me some time off to interview? And then I'll leave working notice up to Allison. It's her favorite.
It is my favorite. So if you decide it's the end of the time with somebody, you can either fire with notice, what's called pay in lieu of notice, or the reason they use the expression pay in lieu of notice is that you can do working notice. And I've had huge success with it. It's based, as Steph said, you should be having conversations and it's like, it's not working out. Like, we're going to have to end this. And they're going to go, yeah, I know. And you're going to say, great, I'm going to give you 4 weeks working notice. which means they continue to do their job for 4 weeks. You still get work out of them, and they can have their going away lunch, and they can feel nice about you, and they move on. But you have actually paid money and gotten some work out of them, and very likely productive work. Give them some time to do interviews, etc. But generally speaking, I've seen huge success with working notice. So don't be afraid of it. Lots of people counsel against it. I've had huge success with it. You're not going to fire your key accountant who you're angry with because they've screwed something up and give them working notice. You're going to walk them out the door. You're not going to give working notice to your IT guy who may self destruct your network. You're going to walk him out the door. But most employees, you can probably get away with working notice if you want to. If you don't want to do working notice, then you give notice and you move on. Notice is very clearly defined under employment standards. And if you can do more, we recommend it because you want people to be reasonably happy.
Agreed.
The only other thing I'm going to say about this is that you don't always need a lawyer when you do a termination. If it's just a straight termination and things aren't working out, you can probably take care of it yourself and give notice. But as soon as you cross the line from this person isn't doing a good job to something that might end up a human rights discrimination claim, then you need a lawyer and the risks are huge. If you fire someone that thinks they've been discriminated against based on their gender, based on something, then the penalty for the employer is anywhere from $30,000 upwards. So don't get yourself into a position where you think someone might sue you or put a claim in under a human rights claim for termination, because it's pricey.
Yes.
So,
And last thing we need to mention is you can't just arbitrarily fire someone because they're on probation.
yes, good one.
That's long gone. That's so 4 years ago. There are 4 steps you need to follow, which you should follow as a decent human being anyways. You need to have the right probation clause in your agreement. It has to be worded correctly, which clearly states you can be terminated without pay. However, you have to show that you've demonstrated that you've given them enough time and enough duties to demonstrate their suitability for the role. You've frequently had communications with them, provided feedback, allowed for training and improvement, very much similar to trying to terminate for performance. And so we don't recommend people terminate during probation arbitrarily without it being very clear cut, without having done these things. If you've done these things, go for it. But we just make sure. So if you're ever concerned, there are very specific steps that need to be taken place during probation. We call them probation terminations.
Just to be clear on that, the rules under employment standards state that you can terminate someone in the first 3 months with no notice. So what Stephanie is saying, that law, even though it's there, it doesn't apply in court anymore. And we're seeing more and more companies being sued for wrongful dismissal in probation and having to pay notice. And then once it goes to court, they pay more notice. So if you're at all concerned and you have a probation clause and you want to terminate someone, just pay them the notice for the first year, which is 1 week.
True. If you bring someone from a very prominent, if you recruit someone who's quite senior, who's coming out of another role too, you bear that responsibility of having pulled someone from another job. So be very careful if you terminate them too quickly after that fact.
Because you would have to pay them not only for the years of the period of service with you, but their years of service with their previous employer. So for example, if someone worked for a company for 8 years and you thought they were awesome for yours and you recruited them, so the subtlety here, you went to them and said, hey, I want you to come make a difference at my company. And then they started, and 4 months later or 3 months later, it didn't work out. You have to pay them not only for the 4 months, even if it was 2 years. If they were there for 2 years with you, you owe them 2 years plus the 6 years that they worked at the other company if you terminate them. So be careful there. All right, it is 2:27, and that is, I think, our last slide. Yes. So Angie, how do you want to handle the last 3 minutes?
I've got a bunch of questions. Probably have more than 3 minutes of questions. If you guys have 5 extra minutes, I think
we do, but we want to be mindful of everybody else.
Yeah. So we'll just start asking questions. In the meantime, for those who want to go, thank you for joining us. Next week is capital planning. So if you're wanting to raise money or want to figure out how to raise money, Keith Ipple from Spring will walk us through it next week. So we'll see you then. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Allison and Stephanie. And we'll go through questions now. So first, I promised I'd ask this from earlier, but this is around vacation pay. Can you please share how to separate the vacation pay and payroll? We have a payroll service, but we're not sure if we're doing it.
The payroll service would know. So look at your pay stubs, and on your pay stub, you'll see regular pay, $50 an hour times 40 hours. And then you'll see vacation earned, and then you will see vacation pay. And those three things should be on every pay stub. And your service provider will know exactly how to do that.
Okay, great. Another person's asking, where'd it go? Here it goes. Just if you have any comments around handling overtime, especially with the high tech sector, since there can be exceptions.
Totally. There's very specific there are very specific definitions of who qualifies for the tech exemption for overtime. So a real simplistic way of looking at it, for those who fall in that category within a tech company, they're exempt. They are not eligible for overtime. And I'll touch on that. And then, but if you have other staff, sales staff, administrative staff that don't meet that criteria, they qualify for overtime. So just as a tech company doesn't mean that everybody within that company is exempt. So it comes down to a specific position. And then there's a whole bunch of details depending on the types of positions, whereas you get sort of marketing and design based positions that there's a bit of a gray area for, and trying to find the definition of that can be a little bit colorful.
So I'm trying to remember, Steph, are there limits right now? If you don't have to pay overtime up to 88 hours in a week, or is it free for all? I actually can't remember
I think it's a free, I don't ever remember seeing a cap on it, but it's written, it very clearly outlines the intent in tech. It's there to understand the ebbs and flows of the life cycle of projects, and understanding that overtime is required. But it's there also from a peaks and valleys intent perspective. So companies are not allowed to, what's the word, to unreasonably overwork their employees. So as an employer, you would have to, the onus is on you to show that you provided balance, right? Time off in lieu. It didn't go on for long durations of time. So they use this word reasonable, like the government does for the majority of their laws, which makes it difficult. But if you show, and if you're operating under that intent, and really anyone who's going to overwork their people, they're not going to stay anyways. Like, so find that balance. So if you want more specifics on us, it's easier when we know exactly your situation. And then we can take a look at, what are these positions and who's exempt and who's not. But you need to provide balance, and you cannot overwork employees in the tech sector, even if they are exempt.
All right. Malcolm is asking if there are any software as a service offerings that can help manage and organize a small company's HR.
Oh, so many. There's lots and lots of HR admin tools out that are great, that allow you to organize all your files and manage your performance management and all that stuff. And it's subscription based, and it's great.
Bamboo HR is one of our favorites right now.
Yep. And and it depends what you're doing. So I'd love to have more specifics. Like we had a smaller growth company that really, they used Bamboo, but they wanted something. They wanted to use a different sort of performance management tool, but it was more of like a peer-based one. It's called anyways, there's a bunch of them, and I'll remember them in a different sort of context. But we can make recommendations based on, like, we're very big about what problem you're trying to solve, right? So if it's to organize, here's the main 3 things that we're trying to fix, then it's easier to sort of recommend what you should go with. But the answer to your question is there's so many, and they're so affordable, and they're so great. You don't need someone doing HR administration. That's like a decade ago. And then clearly from an HR perspective, AnswerBar is HR tech. We do not do HR administration. We do the human to human HR over a SaaS application.
Okay, great. I will just
Malcolm, send us a question and we'll send you a list.
100%.
Yeah. Great. And it's answerbar.com, right?
It is.
Okay, good URL. I've had several people, just as a public service announcement, say Rise Payroll has some security issues, so keep that in mind.
Really?
Okay. Go ahead.
No, that's good to know.
What kind of, this is from Carla, what kind of documents are companies legally entitled to ask for when an employee is sick?
It depends.
Yeah. I mean, COVID aside, I mean, COVID, you're not supposed to ask for anything. Uh, it depends a little bit on your policy, right? I mean, generally, this is what's dictated from company to company.
So let me step in. So the very simple thing that you should understand as a new employer is that you are not allowed to have any information regarding whatever the medical condition is. You are only allowed to know that there is a medical condition. So if an employee is going to be off work due to a medical condition, their doctor must provide you a what's called an ability to work form. It's not a doctor's note saying so and so has got the flu, they need to be off for 2 days. A medical inability to work form basically is the doctor saying this person has something wrong and they cannot work, or they can work part-time, or they limit them, they can't be sitting for too long, or they can't be standing for too long, and this will go on for X period of time. But you will never in any situation ever be able to find out what that medical condition is. Now, for general things, like Steph has said, if you want to request a doctor's note if people are absent for more than 3 days, you can put that in your policies. COVID has changed that. You're not allowed to ask for a doctor's note for COVID related illnesses. It's complicated right now. Part of it is based on we need to trust our people, and the other part of it is doctors are handing out notes for anything these days. So, what's the validity of the doctor's note?
Yeah.
I don't know if that helped answer the question.
If you really don't, if you're having trust concerns with somebody or your gut's telling you something, then have a conversation with that person. It goes a lot further than a doctor's note. And thank you, Allison, for, the medical condition stuff is different.
Yeah, one of the things that's relevant here, and we've just had this issue come up with one of our clients, is that somebody kept being absent on the first day of the week. And so they got, they're allowed a sick day and a sick day. So somebody's off for 1 day and then they're back in the office the next day. You're not going to ask for a doctor's note. But if you see a pattern of them missing the first day of the week over the past 6 months, then you've got a pattern of bad behavior over the weekend, or not getting enough sleep, or not eating well, or drinking, or something. And so that's what we call an attendance problem versus a health problem. Now, it may turn into a health problem, but as Steph said, you sit down and have a conversation. There's a pattern of you missing work every Monday. We need to talk about that. And
don't waste time with the doctor's note at that point, right? Until someone says, I have a medical problem, you don't need one.
No need a doctor's note. Yeah.
All right. I think that's the last question. One quick one is, do you have to pay cash for OT, or can you offer time in lieu instead? You can offer time in lieu, I believe, right?
Yep. It's called bank time. You have to track it very clearly. The employees can request to take it at any time, or can request to take it in cash. But yes, you have to track it. You have to track it separately, and then they can take it either as time or they can take it as pay. If you want to trade out, hey, you worked some extra hours on Monday, why don't you come in late Tuesday? If those become ad hoc things, you can trade those out and not have to track it. But if it starts to become something that you offer as an employer, banked overtime or paid overtime, you have to track it.
Okay, good. We'll leave it there. But that was a flurry. Thank you so much for your time, Allison and Stephanie. Thanks everyone for the questions. People have all been sharing their payroll services. So at minimum, people at least have lots of places to look into. So
beautiful. That's great that everybody was able to share. That's one of the perks of being online. That's super. Thanks everybody for your comments.
Yeah, and lots of thank yous in the comments as well. So appreciate the informative session. Again, if anyone has questions, the website is answerbar.com. First 2 questions are complimentary. And that's it. Everyone, have a great afternoon. Thanks again, Allison and Stephanie. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us again, Angie. We appreciate it.
Great. And
thanks, everybody. Good luck.
Thanks. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye. Take care.
Bye.